It's hard to believe, but here we are in 2022, and I trust you had a great Christmas season, holiday season, and a calm and sane New Year's. We are, as we left off last time in our devotionals, we were talking about Paul's exhortations and guidance and counsel regarding marriage and family relationships. And that has really caused a lot of response from those of you who are out there, because I had quite a few people ask the question, well, what about the issues of divorce and remarriage? And we know that it's pretty ubiquitous in our culture that so many people have gone through divorces, they've gone through widowhood, and they have questions and have gone through divorce. And there are so many different points of view within the church on how this should be approached. And I would say that generally, on one hand, you have people who say that you should take the most narrow and stringent and restrictive view, which would basically prohibit people from remarrying for any cause. Even some have gone to what I would call a really extreme position of saying that if you were not divorced in a biblical means or biblical reason, then therefore you should divorce whoever you're married to now and go back to your first spouse, which I think is an unreasonable and almost really an impossible thing to ask of people. I remember going to a conference one time where this was the position of the speaker, and somebody raised their hand, one of the pastors there, and asked the question, well, how do we deal with a situation where somebody didn't get divorced on a biblical basis, but now they're married to somebody else, they've started a whole other family? And the answer was, well, we're not going to get into the scrambled eggs right now. And I found that really almost offensive, because as a pastor over the years, that's what I deal with a good deal of the time, is the scrambled eggs. I mean, people's lives are messy, and basically you need to really try to see what is the scripture trying to communicate. It's really kind of to me a cop-out when we just take the most restrictive and narrow application and then slap it down like a law and saying, here, live with it. Because the people who you do that to actually have to live with that. But how do we come to what is more of a sane and reasonable response within the parameters that are outlined and allowed within the Bible? We need to allow the Bible to speak for itself, but we need to be careful that when the Bible is silent or not completely clear, that we're not filling in the blanks based upon our own bias or position. And so this is always the challenge that we face when we deal with the topic. So this week I'm going to be touching on the issues of divorce and remarriage. You may decide I'm not interested in hearing any of this, so I'll move on. I hope I can make it interesting and help you to begin to get a deeper understanding of this. Because unless you've had to deal with this situation as a Christian, these circumstances, it's easy not to give them a lot of thought or to come up with a simple or pat answer. But for those who have had to work through the issues, it's been painful, and many times they carry still to this day a lot of guilt and shame and aren't really sure what their standing in Christ is. And so hopefully I'll be able to clear away a lot of the fog and the confusion and really address it more directly. I would say that those of you who really want to dig into this topic a little more detailed, there's a small book, easy read, but very well done, an in-depth exegesis of every single passage in the Bible that deals with the issue of divorce and remarriage. It's written by a guy named Guy Duty, just like it sounds, Guiduty, called Divorce and Remarriage. He's a legal expert, and he approaches the scriptures from that point of view. Really well done and easy to read, and very approachable or reachable to most people who want to read it. If you're not really interested in going to all that effort, you can just simply log on to the internet. There's a website called gotquestions.org, that's one word. And they have, basically you can ask any question you want on scriptures, and they give, I've found, pretty much a very balanced and biblically sound approach to just about every question you can imagine. But particularly, I like their approach on dealing with the issues of divorce and remarriage. So, having said that, let me begin by trying to create a little bit of context here, because the New Testament was written in the first century world, and divorce and remarriage were part and parcel of everyday life in all of the cultures. And the Bible spoke to these things, but to understand where Paul is coming from, because we find Jesus speaking to a Jewish culture, but we find Paul writing to a Gentile, Greek and Roman culture. And where were they at in regards to these issues? Well, First of all, if we start off with the Greeks, there was a Greek writer by the name of Demosthenes, about the 4th century before Christ, who described the view of family life or marriage in the Greek world. He said, we have courtesans. Now, courtesan is a word that basically means a prostitute. Basically, we have prostitutes for the sake of pleasure. We have concubines for the sake of daily cohabitation. So a concubine is a woman that you take into your home as your wife, but she doesn't have the status of a wife. She's just simply there to provide you with pleasure. And when you decide that she's no longer pleasurable, you can just, fire her, basically push her out the door without any obligation or responsibility on your part. And then he said, we have also wives for the purpose of having children legitimately and being faithful guardians for our household affairs. So you have this whole system where a man would go out to the brothels or sleep with prostitutes if he wanted to have sexual pleasure. He would have a woman there that would basically be there to attend to his every needs, like his personal servant, which would involve sexual intimacy as well. But then you would have the wife, who's kind of like the matriarch of the house, who raises the kids. Her job is to get pregnant, have babies, and make sure that you have a legal heir to your properties. And this marriage, of course, was all based upon status and income and position and so forth. So you didn't really have to love your wife. You could just marry someone who would enhance your status and your position in society and maybe even your own personal wealth. Well, part of the problem was that male and female prostitution, as well as child prostitution, became quite rampant amongst the Greeks. I mean, even a wife could have sexual gratification from her slaves, both male and female. And so we find that it was a very permissive, promiscuous culture that often led to the abuse of children, especially children who might be slaves. An interesting little side note, in Sparta, the warrior city of the Greeks, the great opponent of Athens throughout many hundreds of years, that their whole culture was built upon warfare and raising up warriors who could fight effectively. Spartan women were allowed to sleep with any man they wanted to. In other words, if you're married and you see a man who is basically going to give you what you might consider a stronger, healthier, better warrior, you could sleep with him and get pregnant by him in order just to simply selectively breed a warrior class. But at the same time, men who were the warriors would have a mentee, a young man about 12 years of age, 12 to 16 years of age, who they would become their companion, and their relationship was also physical or sexual, because it was believed by the Spartans that that physical intimacy would increase the fighting bond, that they would fight to the death in order to defend one another in battle. So you begin to realize that in the Greek world, sexual attitudes were completely liberated, if you will. There were no boundaries. There was very little that was out of bounds, except, a man wasn't allowed to sleep with his own children. That was about the limitation of it. Now, the Roman world was not a whole lot better. They really tried to absorb a lot of the Greek culture. But in the Roman world, both a husband and wife were free to divorce their spouse. They were also free to have extramarital affairs. And we also know that there was widespread prostitution or cohabitation. Most of the slaves, at least half of the slaves, were used as sexual toys. Basically, a lot of slaves, their primary job was to be sexually active with their owners and their masters. So again, sexual pleasure was really high on the standard. And it's funny where these cultures have some restrictions. I mean, anybody could basically be sexually active except for a Vestal Virgin. And a Vestal Virgin was a young woman who was dedicated for life to serve the goddess Vestal in Rome at the temple there. And basically she was forbidden to have any sexual intimacy with anybody. She had to stay a perpetual virgin. It's kind of where later on the Roman Catholic Church got the ideas of nuns who dedicated themselves to the service of the church. But this whole idea was just kind of crazy and wacky. And I think that's again one of the things we find notable about the Roman culture is that sexual abuse, sexual activity and expression of every kind was pretty rampant and widespread. Well, understandably, and hopefully we understand today, these kind of freedoms caused a lot of harm. And, basically, there's a reason why there are guardrails on places where we can fall off the edge, because we need guardrails to keep us safe. In the same way is true when we talk about activities. We know that there's a lot of hurt and harm and damage that's done because of sexual intimacy. One of the things that God says is when a man and woman come together, they become one in flesh, but also there's a unification of their hearts and their souls together in a kind of a unique way, that this emotional connection and bonding that takes place. And later on, Jesus talks about tearing that apart and the damage that does to us emotionally, psychologically, mentally, spiritually. It's very, very damaging. And so what we understand about the ancient world, there was a lot of people who were very emotionally destroyed and mentally ill, and there became this kind of division between the common people and we call the predatory class, kind of the Epsteins of their day. But under Judaism, there was a whole different set of standards. Now, by our measurement, maybe not that great, but under Jewish law, only the husband could divorce his wife, but he could do it for any cause. And this became a debate in Matthew 19 that we'll talk about further on, where Jesus weighed in on this topic. But literally, it says any and every cause in Matthew 19, and that's literally what was going on. In fact, one of the rabbis of the time, one of the leading rabbis of the time, said that if, anything that displeased you about your wife was the basis of divorcing her, and if she burned your eggs or wasn't a good cook, you just didn't like the way she looked anymore, whatever, she had habits that you disagreed with, you were allowed to divorce her under that. And they basically used the Mosaic law to justify these actions. Yet, at the same time, when a man divorced his wife, he was required to give her the dowry that he received from her father when he married her. He had to remit those monies. And so many times men would avoid divorce just simply because they didn't want to have to pay her the money that had been given to them by her father, and they would hang on to it. Her parents' estate would return to her, and he could no longer claim that property for himself. So this was considered to be amazingly humane. But at the same time, it's important to note, in Jewish law, there was no restriction on remarriage. And as long as the divorce was done legally and properly, and it didn't take much to divorce your wife under the Jewish law at the time. Basically, you would write in a document basically saying, I hate my wife, and you had to say it 3 times. You go to a public place with her, you'd read this, and then you'd roll it up and you hand it to her, and she was loose, and you were loose. Well, again, in light of the wide opening playing field that the Greeks and the Romans had, the Jews were really considered, they considered themselves to be morally superior. But basically all they were doing is manipulating the Mosaic law to justify their own desires. So anyway, I've taken a lot of time to cover this first step, but we'll pick it up tomorrow. We'll get into talking more about why God says he hates divorce. So look forward to continuing this tomorrow. Many blessings.